Hi everyone, it's Brian back with another video for my channel, Teller Defender, and I want to talk about something today that goes on quite a bit, but I don't know if it gets reported as much, but it's something that needs to be talked about because throughout my 9 years as a teller at the bank that I work at, I have seen this, and it is elder abuse. And basically what it is could be a caregiver or trusted family member, even a friend, taking financial advantage of someone that's been entrusted to take care of the finances, usually for someone that's up there in age, for the elderly. But it happens quite often, and as I've mentioned, I've seen this throughout my time as a teller, and I want to give a few examples of this. One of the first times that I've ever seen this happened during my a time with the previous manager that I worked for in town at a different branch. And I remember a gentleman coming in one day, and while he still had money in his account, he had noticed it's not as high as it should be. His balance isn't as high as it should be. And so he was kind of concerned. He didn't understand why it's lower than it should be. And so I know my manager took him in his office and they kind of went over some things and looked on transactions on his account going back quite a ways. But one recurring theme popped up in researching that, and as that it's that there was a number of cash withdrawals from the ATM on the outside of the branch. We have a drive-through ATM that went behind the branch. So he was kind of curious because he goes, I don't ever go to the ATM. If I get cash, I always come to the drive-through or I go inside and withdraw. So he was not understanding how there could be cash withdrawals from the ATM. So as they were researching and trying to figure out ways, my manager asked, well, have you given your debit card out to anybody? He goes, absolutely not. He goes, the only time I've ever given my debit card out to anyone, and then he paused. He just paused and he closed his eyes. And then for a moment, and then when he opened them, he was just like, what time were these withdrawals done from the ATM? So my manager goes back and looks and he goes, well, these are the times here that they typically happened. And then he realized what was going on. He had given his debit card to his son that was only to be used to get gas for his car. But it looked like shortly after he had gotten gas, he decided to go to the ATM and withdraw cash, the maximum amount that you could do at the ATM. And this didn't happen once or twice. It happened over a period of almost 12 months, a full year basically. Well over $1,000 had been taken out of his account. In the shock, the realization that his son was taking advantage of this, it was hard to see. Because here was his father trying to help him out with college and everything, and his son was taking advantage of the situation. So he realized what was going on, and I know my manager at the time helped further with the investigation. In fact, the ATM has a camera, so she could even further verify who was at the ATM during that time, and sure enough, it showed that it was his son that was withdrawing cash from his account. But that's just one example that I've seen. I've seen many others too. Another example, I remember an elderly lady that would come into the branch quite often and withdraw certain amounts of cash. But one day I happened to kind of go through her account and I just saw charges to me that were a little unusual. And I say unusual because this is something that I don't think she would normally typically do for a woman of her age. I saw a lot of DoorDash charges, and I'm like, I know she typically doesn't do DoorDash. Saw a lot of unusual charges in the nearby city that would kind of make me think, why would she do these types of charges? These were at places that younger people would enjoy or do these things, but not someone of her age, of her stature, basically. And so I told her, it's like, I see charges that I feel are unusual. So I told her the best thing to do is to come back tomorrow, because I'm going to have to do some research and see how far back these charges go. So I know I started the research process, but I informed my manager and the banker at the time, hey, I suspect there's these charges coming through. Something weird is going on in her account. So the next day I came in to start my shift, and basically, my manager and the banker were going through a lot of statements of her statements, customer statements, and they were highlighting a list of charges. So I have to laugh because my manager, she kind of praised me. So goes, Brian, I want to thank you so much for looking after our customers and noticing unusual charges. But she goes, we've had to go through so many statements and there were so many charges. It took us a long time to go through all of them. But basically what had happened was, the customer had lent her debit card to her daughter that said she needed help with some things, but her daughter had been unfortunately taken advantage of the situation. So what she did was took the debit card, wrote down the number, the 3-digit code on the back of the card, the expiration date, and so when she gave it back to her mother, she had all the information she needed to basically go on a spending spree, and that's exactly what happened. That's why there are a lot of DoorDash charges, a lot of other different charges. That was something that this particular customer typically did not do, and so thanks to me being vigilant and knowing my customer spending habits, because once you know your customers and what they do, you can spot unusual things and either prevent stuff like this from happening, or at least put a stop to it, from unusual things or unusual charges or scams or abuse of happening to people. And so that's what I did in this instance. And so I know my manager worked with her. Basically, I know they shut down the account and opened her a new account and a new debit card. So that was, thankfully they were able to stop that level of elder abuse right there. Another example here, I remember another customer, an elderly gentleman. He still had a mortgage, and I know he was up there in his late 70s. The problem is, he had his granddaughter as a joint owner on his account, and unfortunately, his granddaughter and her husband took advantage of the situation and took a lot of his money out to spend for themselves. So when it came time to make his monthly mortgage payment, he unfortunately did not have the funds to pay it. And there came a time where he ended up being unalived, and the granddaughter took over the account, but we ended up closing it just because of the level of abuse that was happening. And so, I don't know exactly what happened with the mortgage there and everything, but it was just a sad situation. But I wanted to highlight, the elder abuse, that, these things happen. It happens every day. It happens to people you would not suspect. So, check in with your parents, your grandparents, your loved ones, and make sure everything is okay. If there's a caregiver or another family member is in charge of their finances, just make sure that everything seems to be in order, because it's so easy for people to take advantage of other people, especially if they're in charge of someone else's finances. But this is something that happens every day. It happens all over the United States. I wouldn't be surprised if it happens in other countries as well. But I wanted to highlight this because it's important. This happens all the time, and you can even report this to authorities. If you suspect something like this is going on, you can definitely reports this, because it needs to be reported so other people and agencies can step in to prevent things like this. But I just wanted to talk about this to give you some examples that I've seen over the years as a bank teller. I definitely might do a part 2 of this and give you some more examples that I've seen over the years. So stay tuned and definitely check back to the channel Teller Defender.